All right, welcome back to another episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, wait, I lied. We've got to tell you what happened. So our co-host, Nick Garber, we scheduled all of these for Tuesdays and Wednesdays because that was his day off. And then his nice employer decided to change that. And so we are booked through next month around his schedule because, you know, when you've got authors that are busy, you need to do that. And now he can't make it. So he apologizes. We're going to do some episodes. Wednesdays that drops will be a book review of just the three of us, but we're going to make a point of him not becoming a stranger. And we're going to try to fix this so we can get him on more because he enjoys it too. And we enjoy him making fun of Cisca. I mean, Cisca likes his company.
I'm all right. I'll take any company that's nerdy. No, maybe. I don't know.
He talks nerdy to you, so it's all good. All right, so now
that's a good music video.
It's hilarious. I think you're the one who showed it to me.
I am.
But we're here not to talk about us or Nick, who's hiding, I don't know, doing whatever ICE agents do.
He's eating donuts.
Probably because he's a police officer. They eat donuts. But we're here to talk about Mr. Robert W. Ross. So, Mr. Robert Ross, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. I'm Robert Ross. I'm a contemporary fantasy and sci-fi author. I've got about 7 books in market now in both of those genres. But today, I think we're going to be talking about fantasy.
Yep.
We are, because who doesn't love a good fantasy novel?
Nice pause.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Absolutely not.
All right, so the first part of the introduction done. Now, dear listener, we get to tell you how we first found them. So I actually was introduced to him by Cisca when we were hosting one of the anthologies, and she says, you have to reach out to this guy. He writes the good words, and so you want him in your book. And so we reached out, and he sent the good words, and he's in the book. And if you check out his Amazon page linked in the show notes, you'll be able to find all of his good words. But that is not how you met him, Doc. So can you tell us how you met the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Robert W. Ross?
So Robert Ross, I met through my tenureship as the track director for fantasy literature at DragonCon. He reached out and he said, hey, I'm a new guy. Tell me what I should do. And I said, well, congratulations. First thing is, no, after being accepted, I'm like, first thing first is exactly what you're doing, which is to email track directors, you can look at the past programming that we've done and you can see what jives for you. Also follow me on, follow the Facebook page for the track because I put panel ideas up there. And he goes, okay. And a lot of authors then disappear, which is okay. Because I've now given you a homework assignment and nobody really likes to do homework assignments. But he actually came back like a week later with this page-long email of, these panels from last year, I have something to say on that issue. So it was a romance panel actually we were doing. And he goes, I don't write romance, but I have a romance subplot. And I really feel like I could add something on that topic. Okay. So he ended up with a bunch of panels because he actually reached out and sacrificed himself. And but also he was very kind and he does a lot of giveaways and he did you've donated a bunch of books, set of Sentinels of Creation books as a prize actually. So we had a whole bunch of books to give away for him, which is always nice. And because we have lots of fans who love to read,
and some posters and magnets, and
yeah,
it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And then did some stealth signings because people like to just pick things up and they think, am I going to steal this? But then you have it written in there going, no, you didn't just steal this book; it's yours.
Yes, and it actually turns out that he lives really close to where I live, which was kind of neat. Because there was a point where I'm like, okay, how much have you researched? Like, where the hell do you live? Because it was all those details that either OCD research would get you, or actually,
You just keep freezing. pausing at weird moments.
Uh-oh. So
Yeah.
that's how I met Robert.
Make sure Viking isn't streaming, taking up your bandwidth.
Uh-oh.
No. It has been told if he comes in here, you get docked 50 cents.
No, not coming in if he's using your Wi-Fi, which is why you're freezing if he's streaming something to the tablet.
Nope. I have possession of the tablet.
There you go. What a good mama.
The internet gods are just mad at you. All right. So that is that. Now, Cisca, we have to ask him the most important question. Well, we don't ask him about pineapple on pizza because you said we can't discuss religion here. So ask him the other religion questions.
Okay. The other religion questions are Star Trek, Star Wars, or Firefly?
Firefly.
Good answer.
I'm surprised.
I know, because my books have a dusting of Star Trek. I mean, it's more of a nuanced answer. So Star Trek is multiple series, right? So there's all different ones. Now, Star Trek Next Generation, yeah. The Firefly, the whole series is great. Oh wait, the whole series is one season.
The whole 13 hours.
Yeah, because idiots, right? And then Star Wars, it would be awesome, except Kathleen Kennedy. So
yeah.
Can't control that, unfortunately. So
Star Wars was great. Those 3 movies changed my life. They were so good. I wish they would make more, but what are we going to do?
But they didn't. There weren't any more. Well, they did make The Mandalorian. So that was.
All right, we're going to steal her thunder and we're going to give it back to her.
Okay. So, and this is actually particularly apropos as we were discussing a fantasy novel this time. Potterverse, Game of Thrones, or Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings.
Nice. Very classic.
Good answer.
Absolutely. So, Tolkien, Catholic guy, got to go with him. It's my peeps.
Okay. So, what is your first love? Sci-fi or fantasy?
Sci-fi.
Okay.
But it's not my first writing love. My first writing love is fantasy, but my first love is sci-fi, meaning I was a kid and I was fascinated with sci-fi.
Okay.
But fantasy came right on the heels once I found that I could listen to Lord of the Rings when I was supposed to be asleep by twisting the radio just right, which dates me, I know, but
it's okay.
We've got no judgment here. It's a judgment-free zone.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
look,
nice.
JR doesn't even have a face.
He doesn't.
Tragic boating accident. I lost it in a boating accident.
So what is it that you love about the genre?
About fantasy?
Sure, yeah, mostly about fantasy because we're talking about fantasy. What is it that got you in love with writing it?
Well, to start with, I love elves, especially really cute female elves. So that's just my own thing. But when I play Elder Scrolls, my son comes in and goes, "Dad, why are you playing a girl elf?" I'm like, if I'm going to look at an elf all day long, it's going to be a really cute girl elf. So that aside, with sci-fi, your magic system was created for you. It's called physics. So you can bend it, you can tweak it, you can hand wavium it, but it's there for you. With fantasy, you make your own magic.
Quantum mechanics is much more magic than actual straight up physics. Normal, traditional physics, not so evil.
No, it's not. But when you start trying to get past what we understand as physics and you're starting getting into FTL and dark matter and all those kinds of things, then it starts getting kind of squirrely, right? But with fantasy, your bigger issue is creating the limiting factor, right? So we have a limiting factor in physics. It's called light speed, right? So in fantasy, when you create your magic system, you don't have a limiting factor. So you have to create one. Otherwise, your books suck because your magician or whoever can wield the powers of magic is OP. So you have to create a limiting factor, and then you have to keep track of all that stuff, because if you become in any way at all successful, your readers will tell you that you're being stupid and they will not be kind about it. So they will remember that there's a limiting factor that you forgot, and they will point it out to you. So, which is why I have alpha readers and beta readers, so that I catch those mistakes early.
Well, you've heard my statement about fandom, right? The devil is into details, and so are the fans.
But I love the devil fans. I love them because then they're passionate. I love them.
Well, and you know that they love you, and that it's always good to have somebody who calls you on your mistakes.
Yes, and the last fan that I had that did that, has been sentenced to at least 3 books of beta reading.
It wasn't me, was it?
No, it was not you. You graciously gifted your beta reading efforts early on. This is a gentleman that one of my patrons. So what a nice thing for me to do to my patron.
He pays you and you give him homework.
Exactly.
So that's definitely the education system in action.
Yes.
What is your first memory of engaging in science fiction or fantasy? Was it watching, reading, playing games? How did you discover this?
So for science fiction, it was watching Johnny Sacco's Flying Robot on UHF, which for the kiddies out there is a television frequency. Channels, I think 16 and up, 33 and up. Anyway, so I would be, I'd come home from school and I would watch Johnny Sacco's Flying Robot. Loved it.
We found your cup for your solution.
I need this mug.
You know who invented this mug with 39-ish for its scientific number? Chris Winder, former guest host of the show.
Nice. And it even has Sci-Fi Shenanigans on it.
Yep.
Why did I not know we had that mug? Damn it.
You can still buy them. It's Zazzle. I'll post a link for you.
So that was sci-fi, but then right on the heels of that was Lord of the Rings. So I jumped into Lord of the Rings, listening to the dramatized versions of it, and that's really why I decided all my books should be audiobooks. It was a combination of that early Lord of the Rings experience and that I have a special needs kid and he has a really hard time reading. And I wanted to make sure that he could enjoy my stories and other people who had those challenges could as well. So
you have a fabulous narrator. So.
I do. And an even more fabulous friend. So we got to know each other about 7 years ago now, Nick Podell. And
he's adorable.
He is adorable, and his girls are adorable. We've been adopted as they are our grandlings now. And my daughter, one of his oldest daughter, FaceTimed my daughter about a year ago and said, Autumn, can we adopt you as our auntie? And then Autumn fell on the floor and collapsed. So, because we don't have any of our own grandkids yet. So we have been grandfathered into Nick's kids.
You don't look old enough for grandkids, so maybe that's a good thing.
Your daughter came home and said, guess what? You're going to be a granddad. You'd go, guess what? You're going to be a single mom because whoever did this is dead.
But I'd be happy about it. I'd be happy on both ends because I've told her, I was like, you need to go to find CatholicOrphans.com and that way you can find somebody that I don't have to compete with their parents. This would be awesome. And she's like, Dad, I don't think there is a CatholicOrphans.com website. I was like, business opportunity.
Well, you heard it here first, people.
Running that.
Declan Finn will get right on that.
So, how did your love of fantasy transition you into writing this?
Well, I wrote high fantasy for probably 10 years. And none of those stories will ever see the light of day because they are absolutely pretentious crap. And
high fantasy tends to be.
I'm not good at it. And so that's how it got translated. So it got translated. So I love Tolkien. I love Terry Brooks' Shannara series. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to write that. But it's just not me. Right. When you try to write something that doesn't fit who you are at your core, it shows. So years later, I ended up writing more contemporary fantasy and sci-fi. And I remember the first book that I gave to my wife and she looked like she was scared to death, because she's like, how am I going to tell him that this too sucks? Because she told me that the high fantasy was not good.
Oh,
and she was absolutely right.
I met your wife. She pulls no punches.
No punches. Yeah, I was talking to, quick segue. So I was talking years ago to a guy who was giving me book advice. I was at my son's special needs school, and I didn't know why he was there. I was there to pick up my kid, and he says, so what do you do? And I was like, well, I do this and this. He says, well, anything else? And I said, well, I'm writing a novel. And he's like, oh, that's cool. What kind of novel do you write? And I told him I was writing a fantasy novel. And he asked me how I did it. And I told him, he's like, oh yeah, you're a discovery author. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that had a term. And then, so then he told me who he was, and I was like, that's cool. Nice to meet you, Brandon, and so forth and so on. And then, and so it turns out he's Brandon Sanderson, and I'm wondering, like, why the hell is this guy giving me advice on books, right? This was a long,
special needs kids.
He was actually, he's friends with one of the other track directors at Dragon Con, who's a teacher. Yeah. And so he was at her school. Right. So she and Brandon know each other somehow. And I was just there to pick up my kid. And then years later, in fact, at the last physical Dragon Con, Cisca brought me into the room to chat with him again. And I brought up that I really appreciated him talking to the special needs kids like that. I don't think he remembered it. But yeah, that was an early conversion story from when I was doing high fantasy to the contemporary. And I gave my wife this contemporary fantasy book that I had talked to him about, and she came down, like, she had the flu, and she came down about I don't know, like 10 hours later, and she's like, I'm completely surprised. This is actually okay. Actually okay.
Well, it didn't suck.
It didn't suck. So,
yeah.
so yeah, and she's a huge fan now, which is saying a lot, because she's very, very critical. She's probably my harshest critic and my biggest fan. So
that's nice. I mean, she didn't kick you out, make you sleep on the couch or whatever. So that's always progress.
No, and then the latest book, I made her cry 3 times while she was going through it, in the good way. So yeah, she really likes this last book, which is coming out in August, which means it's probably going to bomb. It's almost for suredly going to bomb.
All right. On that happy note, we're going to ask the important questions. We're going to start talking books and stuff. So many authors let their own real world experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments for you that really shaped the kind of storyteller you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really it's my personal life with my family is that, and I think part of the reason why my early writing wasn't as good is that there are some writers who are just born gifted, and I'm not one of them. So I needed to live a good amount of life, have a lot of experiences, good, bad, horrible, transcendently joyful, and to create that kind of tapestry of life. And in Sentinels of Creation, the fantasy, ultimately it really turns out that it's a story about 2 people who are each half of the other, Kellen and Shannon. There's a lot of the trials and tribulations of my own relationship with my wife in it, in that, there's biological kids and adopted kids and special needs kids in this messy thing we call a family that is bound together with all the types of love, right? So in all my work, there's this weaving of the 3 types of love: the eros, which is the kind you hear about almost all the time, right? That's the sex part, right? The eros, the filial, which is the kind of friendship, love you have, and then the agape, which you hardly ever hear about. And the agape love is the sacrificial form of love. That's the I'm going to push my kid out of the way while the train hits me kind of love. That's the, I'm going to go off to war so that my wife and kids, or my husband and kids now don't have to suffer the slings and arrows of conflict. And that's really kind of foundational to all of my books, kind of weaving into this agape sacrificial form of love, and really the power that it presents to people.
Okay. Lots of Japanese sounding words, but I can dig it. So let's transition away from the writing side and talk about things from a fan angle. So have you gotten any cool fan art or had people cosplay your characters yet?
All of the above. So I've gotten some really cool fan art on Reddit. Hold on. There we go. I love these guys. So I got pop vinyls of the two main characters in Sentinels of Creation, Shannon and Kellen. Gender bending. It says the camera's backwards. I don't even know where my hands are. And then I got a decanter, a bourbon decanter that has the town that Shannon comes from and established in 1280 on it, which is when she was born. So that was super cool with matching glasses. One that says "Daft Man," which is what she calls Kellen, and then one that's the other one's is Highlander, which is she's from the Highlands of Scotland, which is what he
yelling at her.
What's that?
That's what he always yells at her.
He does yell at her quite often. Yes.
All right. Good to know. Good to know. So anybody actually dressed up as them yet?
Yeah. So at I guess 3 or 4 Dragon Cons ago, we caught sight of a Shannon, and I thought that was super awesome. It was incredibly surreal.
That's
it was nuts.
Not the best one. The best one is the Kellen one.
Oh,
you always walk out the Kellen cosplay.
Well, why don't you tell that one then?
Oh, but I wasn't there for it. But apparently, there was a Kellen cosplay, and Robert's daughter really appreciated and liked it. And he was flirting with her, and he goes, "No, you can't go off with her. I know how Kellen thinks, and if he thinks Layton identifies as Kellen, no." I love that story.
No. Yes, that's absolutely true. But that was not the first time. So the first one was the one that was crazy. And then again, this is because being not a J.K. Rowling or George R.R. Martin. These are seminal events for kind of authors at my level. I had this young gal run up to me with her parents. And she said, you wrote Sentinels of Creation, didn't you? These are my favorite books. Will you sign them for me? And my wife's like rolling her eyes going, I'm never going to be able to live with this guy now. And so that was super fun to be recognized in public. It's that perfect situation where you're not famous enough to have it actually ruin your life, but it happens on some rare occasions that kind of spice things up.
Fair enough. So outside of those convention spaces, have you had people ask for your autograph? Traffic tickets don't count, I'm told.
No. That has not happened.
Robert's car is too smart to let him get a traffic ticket.
I can see it now. Oh, you want me to sign your book? No, just sign the traffic ticket, sir. Oh, you must like reading. No, sir, really, please, just sign the traffic ticket.
I was sitting next to a guy on a plane that was reading one of the books on his Kindle.
That's cool.
And so that was fun. I was like, what are the odds of that? And so I was joking with him because I was like, what kind of book is that? That doesn't look very good. I forced him into defending my work.
Did you at least eventually tell him who you were?
I did. I asked him if he wanted me to sign his Kindle.
Did he say yes?
No, he said absolutely not.
Because you just hazed him.
Yeah, he said absolutely not, and this is why I don't like sitting in middle seats.
So, what is the weirdest or funniest story about an interaction with a fan you've had since you started writing?
That one, Cisca knows about. It was at Mysticon, and I was doing a panel, and it was on, I think it was on sex and novels or something that I really shouldn't have been on. And this woman came up to me and she said, well, your books, because I always do the kind of thing where it's implied, right? So
the fade to black.
Right? The door closes. You know, Rob Petrie and his wife are heading off to their twin beds, and you know they're going to push them together, but you're not seeing it. So this woman comes up and she starts describing the sexual relations that are behind the door that I closed, and she said, "Now, isn't this what happened?" And I'm like, sure, okay,
if that's what you want to happen. So
she was very specific, and it was really interesting to hear her go into that much detail from something that I really didn't write about.
It was important to her.
It was.
So, yeah. Moving on from that, can you give us your highlight reel of what you've written and put out in the world?
Sure. So I have written 6 novels in the Sentinels of Creation series. There'll be 7 total. I'm about 50,000 words into the 7th and last book, which is scheduled anyway to come out in January or February of next year. That's going to be the longest one. I think it's probably going to be around 150,000 words. All the other ones have been somewhere between 100 and 130,000. So it may even be longer than that because there's a lot to wrap up, and it's the last hurrah, right, for that series. I'm a real big fan of finishing your series. I've run into too many. Well, not for the reasons you're thinking, Cisca. People not finishing them, but people that even continue writing them. Every single author that I've talked with over a bourbon or a beer ends up getting mad at their characters or their fans if they go past like 8, or they get themselves trapped in some Gordian knot of plot lines that they can't untie. So I made a decision to end Sentinels of Creation after 5 books, and then it got extended to 7 because I couldn't pull it off in 5. But it's all,
you can't pull it off in 7, you know.
No, it's I wrote the last 5 chapters, so you know, if God forbid I get hit by a bus, someone can pull it together.
So one of my favorite series is The Witches of Elandia, and Kate Forsyth at the end of it was meant to be a trilogy, and it ended up 9 books. And I'm on page, like the last page, and it's like, don't forget to pick up the conclusion of the trilogy. And I'm like, unless a meteor is going to come in and nuke everybody, there's no way you're finishing it in one more book. And her books were thick, so but
at least she finished it, and she had every intention to finish it. Some folks,
she finished it in 9 books.
Yeah. So all right, so that's Sentinels of Creation. Paradigm 2035, which is the near future sci-fi kind of a mashup of Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, and The Expanse, I guess, would be the 3 that I would say kind of a mashup of them. Although with a dusting of the X-Men, according to an author friend of mine, which I thought was an interesting perspective. So that's a trilogy. The first book is in market. The second book is with beta readers, and that's coming out in August. The last book coming out in August of 21. I also wrote a novella for JR called Isabella's Campaign. And that's part of the Storming Area 51 anthology, which pick it up. It's awesome. Best value per word. The thing's a tome.
Like 360,000 words. We had to reformat the vellum just to fit them all in. I won't do that again.
No. So what's interesting, JR, and you don't know this, so this is making some news for you. What's interesting about Isabella's Campaign is that Nick went ahead and did the audio for me, and I never released it, so I just give it away to fans who review all my books. So if you review all my books, then it's a present that I give to them. But Isabella shows up in the second Paradigm book, and
That's cool.
And so it ties that universe, and then in the epilogue of the third Paradigm book, which I haven't even begun, obviously, that links back to the Sentinels book series through Isabella. So, so that little novella that we wrote as part of Area 51 is actually kind of the creamy center between the cookies of Sentinels and Paradigm. I cracked Cisca up on that one. Isabella's a creamy center.
You play that in your head.
I'm an innocent lad. I don't know what you're talking about.
Cisca, why are you turning red? Are you okay? Are you taking a drink of water?
And after our cookie talk, why don't you tell us a bit about the Sentinels of Creation series, specifically A Power Renewed, which is book 1. Where did you get the premise from the universe? Did you come up with the series, overindulging in psychedelics, Ouija boards, or just some tainted peaches or bad moonshine?
JR wrote that, didn't he?
Yeah.
I have the moonshine.
I knew it. So I did not have the concept for the whole series. In fact, there's been 3 covers for A Power Renewed. The first cover didn't say book 1 because I thought it was premature and pretentious because I didn't know if there'd be a book 2, right? So then it did really well. A lot of people loved it. So I was like, okay, now I have to decide if I'm going to commit to the series. So the concept behind Sentinels of Creation and A Power Renewed specifically is if the universe is built on the concept of creation and destruction, kind of a yin and yang, and you can't have one without the other. And every universe was ultimately destroyed as part of the deal in order for it to be created. And the incarnation of that creative force, God, if you will, didn't like that deal, but couldn't directly oppose it. And he would create these people, these sentinels of creation, that would have, like Neo does with the Matrix, the ability to kind of bend things. They can't break them, but they could certainly bend things and make things happen. And then if you were this person that existed outside of time and you were going to move the cheese throughout millions of years, subtly, really subtly, so you couldn't get caught, what would you do? And I love the line of God draws straight with crooked lines. I think that's just an awesome line. And Kellen, which is the main character of Power Renewed, couldn't be more of a crooked line. I got people that write to me and go, I love this book except all the profanity. I'm like, I wrote on the back of the book, Kellen weaves profanity like a paintbrush of a maestro. So he is an atheist, and there's nothing that ruins. A fan of mine has this put on a T-shirt. There's nothing that ruins an atheist day worse than meeting an archangel. So so he is an agnostic / atheist, wavering, and the creative force is determined to draw a straight line using this very crooked person. And so ultimately, it's his journey from that to the 7th book, where he ultimately is the final chess piece, if you will, to determine whether or not, for the first time in all of the multiverse, the destructive force that eventually destroys all universes is going to be thwarted. So it's a classic heroic journey, going from a profane, funny secularist to what he ultimately has to be if the world is going to endure, and all the people surrounding him along the way that are equally, I think, interesting and in their own ways not necessarily profane, but there's certainly
in fact, the Highlander is rather religious and profanes at him whenever he profanes about God. It's very fun.
Yes, she is definitely an interesting character. I love them all, and will be sad to see them go.
Well, just don't George R. Martin them, and you can always come back.
No, I very rarely kill them off. In fact, I put in one of my author's notes that there's enough darkness in the world, and if you're looking for that, there's plenty of books out there. So,
well, let's talk about, because you just mentioned that you had 3 covers. So let's see the one that finally made the cut to stick around, because it is a really awesome cover. JR, that's your cue.
I can only work as fast as the internet gods will let me.
So can you tell us about the cover?
Yeah, so this is a scene where inside of what I call Creation's workroom. So Creation's workroom is a pocket universe where the creative force, again, God, if you will, depending on your own perspective, tested things out. Because I've always been fascinated with how the universe is put together. Because as we slowly get smarter, we start seeing the fingerprints of some kind of intelligent designer, right? The way the Trinity nuclear test, which is why in my sci-fi book I put that in there. The way atoms are put together and how they can be taken apart in a rather destructive fashion, which shows you that you're not supposed to take them apart.
Details.
The details. So this is Creation's workroom. So this is where all the things got tested and everything else. The character on the left is a fallen angel, a demon called Asmodeus. Kellen is there in the midground, and one of the Sentinel's capabilities is to create portals through that create tears in creation. And it's the sci-fi equivalent of FTL, right? So if you want to get someplace really quick or get to some other dimension, then the Sentinels can do that. If you see on Kellen's arms those runes, those are actual Enochian runes. I had to do some research on those. So those are angelic Enochian runes that stream down Kellen's arms and Shannon's arms when they are channeling some of that power. Props to my daughter. She's the one that came up with that idea, because she said, no one's going to know if someone's cosplaying Kellen. It's just going to be some dude in a Supernatural t-shirt. So you need to put those runes down his arm. What if runes ran down his arm? I was like, that's really cool. And then so we saw him at DragonCon, some guy with runes running down his arm. She goes, see? I told you. And then, of course, in the background is Shannon, Shannon McLeod, who's quote unquote the Soulborn. So as they were both conceived in completely different times, 800 years apart, and their souls became into the baby that was going to be them. They were both infused with this capability to connect with each other. So she was so she and Kellen were connected, and so one of her lines is, "You were mine before you were born, and I'll be yours after I'm dust." And that's the connection between those two.
And that's not creepy at all.
She doesn't think so.
Sometimes when women love men, we say things, or not even men, just other people. I know I've said some things that if I said it to anybody other than my own child, it would have been very creepy.
Right, that's it.
All right.
I will love you forever, and you're never getting away from me. Sounds really kind of creepy sometimes.
That's right.
All right. So moving along to the book itself, what would your 30-second elevator pitch for this novel be?
Let's see. Profane agnostic encounters the spiritual realm and finds out he's the last chance for salvation of the universe, and says the universe is screwed.
He did. It's a very accurate description.
Okay. I thought it would be something along the lines, buy it or I break your kneecaps.
That works. that's kind of the dedication in the book to all those whose kneecaps have not been broken. I thank you.
Outstanding. So what makes your series special?
I think that the what people have told me is they haven't seen before is kind of a mythologizing, if that's a word. I just invented it. Mytholizing of kind of the God devil creation entropy kind of mythos, right? And it may be somewhat unique. I don't think that really there are any new stories. I think there's just new ways of telling old stories. So I have a lot of people that that tell me, Jessica's private messaging me. I have a lot of people that tell me that's have you read this guy's book? Because it sounds like you're doing that. And I'm like, no. What if you start writing full time, your ability to read other people's stuff just shrinks. So I've had people say, there's a little bit of Neil Gaiman's Lucifer in there. I've had people ask me if there's some other characters from books that I haven't read, authors I haven't read, which I always take as a compliment because if they're a fan of somebody's work and they see some of mine in there, then I certainly take that as compliment. But so yeah, I would say that it's really being able to take those kinds of big themes that have always been with us. People wondered what caused lightning, and then there was Thor. People they wondered what was justice, and then there was this embodiment of justice. So all of those things that have always been answers that we've created to questions that we didn't know the answers to is kind of in the book, and obviously informed by my own kind of faith-based background. It's not a religious book by any stretch of the imagination, as many people, especially religious people, have told me. But there's a thematic in there that I think is interesting, because I think that ultimately we are all looking for kind of answers to the questions that have no answers other than by belief.
Okay, so now it's time for us to use Cisca's made-up favorite word. She likes to ask the Tropalicious question. So what tropes, you wanted us to use it in the episode. What tropes do you think Sentinels of Creation book 1 hits the best?
I guess the biggest trope is the savior of the universe trope. I mean, there's a reason why it's a trope. I mean, you can do tropes badly and you can do tropes well. I'm not going to presume to say which one I did, but I don't think that tropes are necessarily bad. Just like I think cliches have wisdom in them. But yeah, I would say the savior of the universe, the whole, Frodo and the ring kind of thing.
So will there be a ring?
There is a ring, but it doesn't have anything. It's not evil. It has no, it plays a tertiary role at best.
All right. So what subgenre or genres do you think this story best fits into?
Contemporary. It used to be urban fantasy, but then they added a sub genre called contemporary fantasy. So I would say
added it. Nobody else.
They keep adding it, and you know what? I think they add it so that people who have like metadata sniffers can put their book in a category. I saw some guy put a book who will remain nameless. You know who it is, Cisca.
Yeah.
He put his book in a subgenre called movie tie-in Stargate, which has like 3 books in it, and his didn't talk about Stargate.
I've read.
So
the
you're
book
like number one.
It has. I read the book you're talking about, and I've watched years of Stargate. All of
best
the
franchise ever.
All of Atlantis. No, there's no Stargate tie-in.
But it was number 1. It was number 1 out of 4 books in Stargate without any reference to Stargate. So you
didn't even use the same tropes. Forgotten Ruin is more of a Stargate novel than that novel.
So I was going to ask, have Amazon create a category called a category of fantasy, contemporary fantasy, Ross fantasy, right? And then I would be like number one in that category, which would have 7 books in it that would all be mine.
So what's the difference between contemporary fantasy and urban fantasy?
So as it's been explained to me, is that urban fantasy is more set in cities or urban areas, whereas contemporary fantasies, the geography could be anywhere, but it has that. So like Harry Potter might be considered, in addition to YA, which I don't really think it is, but it always gets thrown in YA.
It's just in the children's section.
Who knows? I would consider it as contemporary fantasy because it's you've got people with cars and the cars fly, right? So urban fantasy would be if I guess if Spider-Man didn't use technology or radioactive spiders to have his superpowers and he just kind of flew around, then that would be kind of and cast spells in Manhattan, then I guess that would be considered urban fantasy.
All right. Well, now we're going to talk about the story itself, more specifically the main character or characters. So what makes him or her unique in the crowded field of fantasy literature? Now, you've already told us a little bit about your 2 main characters because they were on the cover, but what makes them stand out in the field of the genres?
So again, you find this out later on in the series when, with Creation playing the long game. But Kellen has an eidetic memory. So, but he also has ADD, which is a bad combination. So, so he can't forget anything he's ever seen, read, or smelled. Anything that any of his senses that have experienced it, it's frozen in there perfectly, picture perfect. So he made the mistake of reading multiple translations of books, and now he's got those things in conflict. But it also allows him to do things like create temporal portals, because he can perfectly conceptualize what it would look like to see something that was visualized through tachyon particles. I'm getting too nerdy, but so all of the magic system in Sentinels also has an analog in science, which I loved from early Piers Anthony books. He wrote this Adept series, and half the world was fantasy and half the world was science, and where they connect, it was like 2 dimensions that connected, like 2 hemispheres of your brain. And I know a lot of people didn't like that series, but I loved it. So that's Kellen. So he's got an eidetic memory. He doesn't believe in pretty much anything initially.
And he talks to himself a lot.
And he's got a smart ass mouth, and you just want to smack him because he's very sarcastic. But he's loyal. He's incredibly loyal. And then Shannon, one of the other main characters, is she's kind of a displaced 13th century Scottish kind of warrior maiden. And the first time she ends up in Kellen's era, she spends 10 minutes flicking on lights, going, what? And then one of the other characters brings her a pizza, and she's like, this is the best thing ever, until she hands her a Coke, and she goes, I was wrong. This is the best thing ever.
I feel like we could watch that as a movie where they just go through thing after thing. No, this is the best thing ever.
So
does she get to try ice cream?
She does get to try ice cream, but still pizza is the best thing. And because it's based here in Atlanta, she goes to, one of the other characters is a fancy pants guy, and he's taking them all out for steak dinners. And Shannon whispers to Kellen, and she's like, no, babe, they don't have pizza. It's a steakhouse. They have steak. And she's like, oh.
So, as
I'm gonna have to buy these audiobooks.
Shannon is one of the main characters. So are there any secondary characters that you particularly want to share some tidbits about for us today?
Yeah, well, I love Megan Doherty. She was an early. She's a female corpsman, so she's kind of a medical person who in combat, one of the early women in combat, and she is. I love her to pieces. She where Kellen evolves in his use of profanity and his hard edges get shaved off. Megan has absolutely no interest in that. Her fire team got taken out by some werewolves, and she's like, we're going to go fuck them up. because she found out what Kellen could do. She's like, we're going to fuck them up. And he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I got training wheels. She's like, I don't care. They killed my boys. We're going. And he's like, but nope. So I love Megan. She is an incredibly sexual being, makes no apologies for it. She meets her counterpart in Sarah May, who you find out who he really is later on in the series. So I love her to pieces. Lucifer, which I feel a little guilty because people really love Lucifer, and I don't know that that's a good thing. But Lucifer is not. What I like about him, the way I've written him, is he's complicated. He's not two-dimensional, and I was always interested in trying to figure out what would be the motivation for this being, right? So I kind of explore that, and it finally comes to fruition in the last book. But there's hints in it as early as the third book that that sometimes the villain of a story is the villain in text he had no intention of writing. It doesn't excuse what you do. Your actions are still your own. And that's, I'm really fascinated with how his story unfolds. So, and I've gotten a lot of praise and a lot of shit for him. And I think that's good, right? Because I think the worst thing you can do as an author is write things that no one cares about. So if people are passionate on either side of the equation, I think that you're doing your job.
I would have always said that the worst thing you could do as an author is believe your own hype. Because, when you do a lot of podcasting and you set up all these interviews, you deal with some interesting characters, and you could definitely peg the ones that believe their own pressers.
So,
yeah.
Having said, because you mentioned villains, do you have a villain? Because it doesn't sound like Lucifer is your villain. Not really.
He tries to be, but he he succeeds. He succeeds in some place. I guess he's little V villain. He's more chaos.
Villain.
He's more chaos than he is villain.
Lucifer reminds me of a phase I went through in school where everybody told me, "Oh, well, you just can't get in trouble," and I cut class. I smart mouthed to the teacher, and I still couldn't get in trouble. And I was trying so hard to not be the big girl, and apparently it didn't. And nobody believed it.
Yeah, so the true villain is destruction. So at the end of the day, there's a force that just intends to end anything.
But we don't see that the real villain behind it all until later.
Right. So you get through these initial villains, and they are. I mean, because it's like, not everybody can be Hitler, right? So you've got yeah, right. So you've got these mini bosses, and you're like, these guys suck. Boy, I hate him. And then what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of peel the layers off and go, I hate this guy. He's bad. And then kind of go, let me show you what real bad is. Let me show you what the ultimate bad is. So then it creates this contrast. And that's part of what I wanted to do with the Lucifer character is like, boy, he's bad. But then when you compare that to what creation's ultimate adversary is, and it happens sometime in the series where the revelation of one of the characters is like, wow, I always thought he was your adversary. He, meaning Lucifer, was your adversary. But this dude, wow. And that's what I wanted people to have, that kind of wow moment.
Okay.
So, how would you think your characters would respond if they found you in a back alley?
If they knew that you were the author that created
they knew you were the author.
And then they met you in a back alley, like, oh, you're Robert W. Ross. You're the guy on the cover.
I think Lucifer would say something on the order of, you didn't make me boring, and I do hate boring, because he's always saying that. Kellen would probably say, thank you for hooking me up with Shannon, because she's so far outside of my league that I owe you. And Megan would have said, "Why do you keep talking about my tits?"
No, she wouldn't. She'd say they're glorious, but why do you keep talking about them?
That's true. You're
and
right.
then that begs the question: what his wife would say about him talking about her tits.
Oh, I bet his wife. His wife has no problem about it.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Because she knows that all the boobs in my books are hers.
That should go on a T-shirt on your merch store.
That is the best line ever.
All right, Cisca, you get to take the training wheels off and try the new question we just added to the lineup.
That's it. I'm having fun laughing. Okay, so give us a sneak peek into how the sausage was made. Were there any cool scenes or ideas you had to cut from the final book that you plan to use later? I mean, we just talked about tits. Now we talk about sausage.
That
was not intentional. I promise you, dear listener.
All right.
Glorious.
So yeah, both. So in the I'm trying to remember these books now. In the fourth book, A Burden of Chaos, Kellen makes a promise to someone in that book, and I love this. I really do, because some authors don't, and I think that that's because they're successful too early. I think that people that have too much money or too much success too early, they don't appreciate stuff. So I have this author or this reader write to me, and they said, Kellen made a promise and he didn't fulfill it. And I was like, I know he didn't, because I had forgotten about it. And then I was doing alpha reads. One of my alpha readers said, "Hey, Kellen didn't finish this promise." I'm like, "Oh crap! Do I have to rewrite that? That's a seriously extra chapter at least." And she's like, "No, it would be great if you had that solved in the first chapter of the next book." I was like, "Good idea, especially because it means I don't have to work right now." So that was a chapter that I ended up using later, right? It was about this resolution of this promise that Kellen made in a different temporal spot that he had to resolve. And it got resolved in, I think, a much better way than had I written it at the same time, because I got to marinate in all the reviews, and I got to read about all these different people and things they liked and they didn't like, which is another thing I think that if you're too successful, you don't do, is you really got to read those reviews, the good ones and the bad ones, and take them to heart. Not to the point where you like crawl in a ball, and whine about these bad reviews, because I've gotten some doozies. And I did initially crawl into a ball, but I've gotten over it. And then the other one was a scene where my alpha readers were like, "This is absolute shit. You need to cut this entire chapter." And they were right, because the world influences you as a writer if you're paying any attention at all. So I love this movie called The Greatest Showman. I thought it was great. My daughter and I loved it. We were singing the songs. We were all doing this stuff. And I had a scene where Kellen and Shannon were fighting these wraiths, and so bad. And they were humming the song from the movie. And my alpha readers were like, to a man and a woman, they were like, circling shit. So I cut it. I cut the whole thing, and ended up reworking it. Took out all the Greatest Showman references, which would have dated the book for one thing, and then it was just bad in other ways. And it ended up being. I loved the idea of fighting to music, so I kept that in there. It's a scene where Kellen is like, "Boy, this is a bad scene. There are a lot of nasties around. We need to get backup." But these nasties were sucking the life force of kids in order to create a portal to destruction, to allow destruction in. And Shannon is very maternalistic. She is all about life, loves kids, and she's like, mm-mm. And she didn't say anything. She's just tapping her boot, and Kellen looks over and like, "What are you doing?" And she's tapping, and she's like, "Don't you fight those people. We have to get help. Don't do it." And she pulls out this earbud and she hands it to him and jumps over a railing. And it's the Immigrant Song, which is a ripping good song for fighting people, much better than The Greatest Showman. So so he's got this one earbud, and he's like, ah, damn it. So so then he jumps in because he's not going to let his wife or girlfriend or whatever she is fight alone.
Does he ever get to go back to her time to see what that was like?
Oh yeah.
Oh, those are fun.
Yeah, he does, and he hates it. He ends up he's screaming at the roof of a cottage. I hate the 13th century, because he's lying on some bed. He's like, "What is this? What is this stuff with rocks and twigs? This thing sucks. I want my Tempur-Pedic."
So, what did he think about haggis? Did he get to try haggis?
I don't think he did get to try haggis. I think that he said Scottish food is based on a dare, and he wouldn't eat it.
Okay.
So
I didn't see that.
But he got to find demons, and he got to Shannon's Da wanted to burn him as a witch. That was fun.
Oh yeah. See, now I'm gonna have to go buy this one, and I don't have credit. You're gonna make me wait a month because I'm gonna get my credits next month. But all right. So what can you tell us about the universe and miniseries? The worlds where the story is written are just as much character as the protagonist. So can you give us a hint of what the listeners, readers, viewers can expect from the worlds that you've created?
Well, the Sentinels world is pretty straightforward. It's written in linear time, even though there's a lot of timey-wimey stuff. Kellen and Shannon and the other characters go back into time, all different times. But it takes place from 2016 to 2022, 2015 to 2022. So it's a 7-year time period, and each book comes out in the year that happened. So A Scion of Amber Light is the book that just came out, and it's 2021, and Kellen makes multiple references to what a dumpster fire 2020 was.
Yes.
Just a complete shit show, right? And I think that's kind of cool. It's very straightforward. So whatever was happening in the world is happening in their world, because it is in fact contemporary fantasy. It is our world. Paradigm 2045, which is the sci-fi, which we're not getting in detail on that here, but it's set in 2045. And
we do have the archive of that interview we did for 2045, and we'll release that once we get it.
So this episode goes out on Sunday, and then we're
Easter.
going to. Is it?
Yes.
Oh, that was.
It's Easter.
That's because we knew how religious you were, and we wanted to respect you.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and of course, you say timey-wimey, and instantly I've got the quote from the 10th Doctor that I'm typing into the chat for Cisca. But
I already know the quote.
Yep. And Kellen makes reference to that specifically. There's a lot of Doctor Who references throughout. There's a lot of pop culture references throughout, but Kellen is a huge fan of Doctor Who, and so is his clerk in his bookstore, Juliet. There's so yes, he
reference to our favorite con.
That's true. The entire second chapter of the second book is called Dragon Con.
Okay.
That's where Kellen and Shannon actually see Kellen and Shannon being cosplayed. And he was like, what the hell is that about? Because it turns out, I took a piece from Robert Heinlein, which I love about that, is that I think he invented it, this concept of world as myth. And very few people either remember it or use it. The concept is that a significant amount of belief can create reality, and a significant amount of reality can create belief. So in his worlds, in Heinlein's world, they're tooling around in this spaceship called the Gay Deceiver, which is just a badass name, with an AI that controls the ship. And they run into characters from Wizard of Oz, because enough people had been in this realm of Wizard of Oz that it impacted the mind of L. Frank Baum, and he created the book Wizard of Oz. And so some of that is in my books, not related to anything Heinlein did, but in that
the concept.
There are the concept. And so Kellen runs across fictional characters and they're very subtle, and you could miss them easily because I won't put words in other authors' mouths because they're not my characters. So, but you might see someone and they're like, "Wow, I'm a huge fan of that book series, and that character looks like one of the books from that series." And so there's some of that in there, but a lot of Doctor Who. So Kellen tries to describe weird shit that goes on when time travel, and he just like timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. So he uses that. Then Shannon picks it up, and then one of the things that people seem to like the most is when he's trying to explain the dangers of time travel, and he's like, you got to be careful, Shannon, because she does some really crazy shit.
So does he.
Yes, but she did something particularly bad when it came to the Beatles. And he's like, "You're going to create a paradox," and she's like,
"A pair of dogs?
A pair of dogs? Or they must have been really bad dogs." And he never lets her forget that. Boy, does he never let her live that down.
All right. So just letting that marinate for a second. So Sentinels of Creation, A Power Renewed, is clearly a part of a series. I know because it says so on Amazon. There are currently 6 books out, and a 7th book you mentioned was being planned. But after that, is their story done? Will there be more from these characters in side series? Where do you see this going? Is it when the 7th book ends, is that the end?
Never say never, right? As soon as you do, something else happens. But I could see there being some novellas or side quest novels. I've had a lot of people ask about some of Shannon's adventures before she met Kellen back in 13th century Scotland. One of the characters that you meet is an eternal centurion from Rome who did something around the turn of the first century that earned him that immortality. And in the last book, he ends up hanging out with SEAL Team 6 in Afghanistan, killing werewolves. So I got a bunch of people asking for those. I'm not particularly. I don't think I'm good at writing military sci-fi or in fantasy. So I'd have to talk to a couple of people that are really good at it. Cisca knows them. I don't want to throw their name out. They're associated with me and they're like, "Why'd you say my name? Oh my God! Now people think of me and you." And so but as I mentioned, the epilogue of the Paradigm book. The main character of the Paradigm book will meet a character from the Sentinels universe 23 years after the end action of the 7th book. As I mentioned, it's linear time. So the 7th book comes out, God willing, in 2022. 23 years from then is 2045, and the last scene of the last book of Paradigm will be when a character from Sentinels walks up to talk to Charlotte Omondi, who's the main character of Paradigm. And that could spawn an entire interesting mashup of fantasy and sci-fi.
So do you foresee doing that for every series afterwards, where you link all of them in the same universe?
No, because I promised my daughter that this never, it's only happened to me once. I woke up with an entire book in my head. So I wrote down the outline about 18 months ago, and it's not a romance, but it is a love story set in 2020, with all the crap that was going on. And she is desperate for me to write that, but that would be a one and done. It wouldn't be a series. It would be just a one story. But the deal is she's going to have to narrate it. So.
Oh,
for free.
Yeah. So,
obviously, you have your own internally consistent rules from the science and technology and the magic. But what sort of magic or tech would you take from your books?
Oh, I think I would love to be able to do temporal portals. I mean, that would just be a disaster for me to be able to go
would
back.
Never be the same.
There'd just be less of it.
So
But
how
more of
is,
it at your house.
More of it at my house. And Kellen does that. So it would basically, you want to know what I would do, what he does. So he went back in time and to when the Macallan Scotch distillery was founded, and had him put a cask away for 200 years and have it shipped to him, or 150 years. I'd buy Apple at 8, you know, it would be bad, but that's what I would do. I would love that. And I meet all sorts of historical characters. Shannon gives Kellen crap for that. She comes home and there's a painting on the wall and she goes, "Where did you get that?" It's like, "I don't know, I somewhere." And then his fancy friend comes in and goes, "Dude, that's a Van Gogh." He's like, "He wasn't making any money."
all right. So other than, the technology we would expect from the period that it's set in, is there anything that you're adding, or
Yeah.
any magic?
In a previous life, I was in charge of a number of artificial intelligence teams in doing advanced research. So I put a lot of that in my books because it's something that I actually know, and it scares people, especially because it's when they ask me, "How real is that?" and I go, "It's probably already happened." So that's how real it is. So I put a lot of that in my books, and then I stretch it a little bit with nanotechnologies in more of the sci-fi. But what I try to put in all of them is, even in the fantasy, there are constraints that are based on the physical world, and I get into trouble with some folks when I talk about when we talk about magic. Magic and miracles are hard to distinguish, and my point is that if you were the intelligent designer of a world as complex as ours, assuming we're not living in a simulation, you go through all that trouble to build it. How often would you break your rules rather than find a way to use the rules you created to make things miraculous happen? So really, that's kind of how I build most everything. Is that the reason why we think things are miraculous or magical is because we haven't figured out how the underlying things were put together to make it happen.
Okay. Next question is your favorite too.
How does your universe, and how did you go about creating the fantastic creatures you have in this universe? We can talk about aliens on another podcast.
So I can't take a whole lot of credit for that, because again, it gets back to the premise of are there any news stories or just retellings? I would say that my perspective on the characters is my own and unique to a large degree. But there's werewolves, right? There's vampires. There's jinn, which you don't see a lot of jinn other than like Robin Williams' blue jinn, from Aladdin. So there's jinn, and there's the fae, and you don't see a lot of the fae being portrayed. But so my fae came about from the first human laugh and human cry, and there's the twilight fae and the dark fae and the light fae, and then how they each have their courts.
I like
and then there's what's that?
The dog.
The direwolves, yeah, that's interesting. So that one, I guess that one's probably completely unique. So there's a line of the first dog, which is from Lupa. Lupa was the first dog, which historically Lupa is the wolf that nursed Romulus and Remus at the founding of Rome. So she is an immortal being, and takes her canine wolf type lovers from time to time, and her genome is dominant. So anything that she bears is Lupa's, and they walk with man, and they choose who they walk with, and you don't want to screw with them, you really don't. Whoever they bond with, they can share their thoughts. And in my book, the dire wolf, Kara, or his full name is Kadiad Usul, which is noble friend in Scots Gaelic. He's like a rowdy teenager, and people really love him talking to people when he shares his thoughts with Shannon and Kellen.
I think he's awesome.
All right. So before we let you go, is there anything that we didn't ask about Sentinels of Creation, A Power Renewed, that you want to tell us before we wrap this puppy up?
No, you guys asked a whole lot of really great questions. Some of the best I've had. So I'm not blowing smoke. It's really, really good. I'd say, if it's a fun romp. I don't know anybody. There's people who haven't liked it. It's got really good ratings overall, but no one has said, I felt worse after reading it. And I would say it's a lot of fun. There's deeper meanings if you choose to scratch for them, but I really hate when creators try to beat a message into your head. My job is to entertain you. That's my job. And if I've entertained you, then I do my job. And if you want to look for something else that I may have snuck in there somewhere along the way, then have a good time. I've got people that have read the books 4 or 5 times, and they find stuff that I didn't even put in there. So, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think the characters are real. That's probably the biggest thing I get is that the dialogue, it sounds like real people. And that's one of the biggest compliments I get from Nick is that he says, I can't wait to read your next book because it's like my friends are back. And that's really freaky because his voice is them. So he says, I love to hear them talk in my head in the booth. And it's because he and I become such good friends. When I'm writing, I hear his voice in my head as I'm writing, which is also pretty creepy.
Okay. And that's saying a lot that he thought it was a good interview because he started the pre-show stuff by telling us how we were the worst podcasters ever because his previous podcast that he just did sent him booze. So since I'm telling you that, you should tell that story real quick so that way they know to check the other side out because we, share the love.
Okay. The podcast was the three biggest losers, and they sent me a bottle of I have it here because I was telling them the story. They sent me a bottle of Horse Soldier bourbon, which is distilled by Special Forces guys, the first guys to go into Afghanistan after the towers fell. And the bottles are cast by molds created from the wreckage of 9/11. And the image on the front of the bottle is the statue of the 12 guys that went into Afghanistan that were able to halt the progress of the Taliban at the time. And they all came back too. Not all, not without some damage, but they all came back too. So they sent me that bottle, and I really appreciate the three biggest losers. And I appreciate you guys.
I think it's really awesome because your books definitely have a strong thing of agape, and that definitely is.
So
you can see the flag in the background. That's in my stories as well. So my dad was a career Marine Corps officer. That's his flag from when we laid him to rest in Arlington, and those are the 7 bullets they fired. It's a theme in my books too, is honoring the service of all of the folks, and you guys are among them, obviously. So I appreciate each of your commitment and service. It means a lot to me, and I make sure it's in all of my books, at least subtly.
Okay, and if you want to find the 3 biggest losers, just look that up on Facebook, and they have a group. They even look like they built a submarine in their basement, which is kind of cool. So if that's something you're interested in, you want to hear him talk on the subject of his books and other places with other questions, that's the place to go. So,
but we had the best questions.
Yeah, sure we did. Absolutely. Because we wrote
You actually did. You did have the best questions.
So we've refined the interview process over, at this point, 4 years of interviewing. So Robert, how can listeners and viewers find you?
You can find me on I have a Patreon. If you want to support my work, that's patreon.com/ my full name, Robert W. Ross. You can also find me in most social places as Ross Author. So Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, Ross Author. And my publisher site is www.spartamac.com. And that's where you can get signed books and that unreleased copy, or that private release copy is a better way of putting it, of Isabella's Campaign. After you buy the physical book from JR, you can get the audio book of just mine from me. And that's at spartamac.com.
All right. And as always, if you want to support an author, buying their books is a great way to do it. Or Patreon.
And reviewing them.
And reviewing them.
Yep.
You can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades /blasters tack and tack blades. Our Twitter is twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show. Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_ show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/blastersandbladespodcast. If you want to throw a little bit of coinage in the tip jar, it's buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. And be sure to put it's for the podcast. Now, we've been at this an hour and 20-something minutes. So, Cisca, I think it's time for you to bring us home.
Okay, so thank you for spending your precious time with us. For the absentee donut-eating Nick Garber, J.R. Handley, I'm Cisca. This was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, things that go boom, and ADHD.
Look.